The prosecution never saw it coming. Sophia Reeves stood behind the mahogany defense table in her perfectly tailored navy suit, watching Assistant District Attorney Marcus Webb fumble through his closing argument like a freshman law student who had forgotten his notes. 3 years of meticulous case preparation reduced to rubble in less than 40 minutes. She almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The jury hung on her every word as she approached them for her final statement. At 29, Sophia had built a reputation that made seasoned prosecutors break into cold sweats when they saw her name on the docket. Her success rate was legendary, her preparation flawless, her courtroom presence commanding. "Have any of you ever felt completely powerless?" she had asked the jury that morning, her rich voice carrying easily through the packed courtroom. Her client, a single mother accused of embezzlement, sat straighter as Sophia wove the narrative of desperation that had led to poor choices. Sophia knew something about feeling powerless. She knew what it was like to be dismissed, discounted, humiliated in front of people who mattered. The memory always lurked just beneath the surface of her confidence, ready to fuel her fire when she needed it most. 3 years ago, the Meridian Hotel ballroom had sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the laughter of Chicago's elite. The annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala drew the city's most influential figures, from politicians to business moguls to the kind of men who operated in shadows but donated generously to maintain their public image. Sophia had worn her best dress that night, a deep emerald green that complemented her rich brown skin and hugged her full curves. She was a junior associate then at Morrison, Klein & Associates, barely 2 years out of law school, but already showing promise that had her superiors taking notice. The firm had sent her to network, to make connections that could benefit their practice. She had spotted Vincent Torino across the crowded ballroom before she ever knew his name. Tall and commanding at 6 feet 2 inches, with the kind of Mediterranean features that belonged on magazine covers. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his charcoal suit clearly custom-made to accommodate his broad shoulders and athletic build. When he smiled at something his companion said, Sophia found herself holding her breath. He moved through the room like he owned it, which in many ways he did. Everyone wanted his attention, his approval, his business. Sophia had done her research after overhearing his name. Vincent Torino, 32, head of what was rumored to be one of Chicago's most influential families. Officially, he owned construction companies, restaurants, and import businesses. Unofficially, the whispers suggested much more. She had watched him for an hour before gathering the courage to approach. Her confidence then was different from what she possessed now, built more on hope and determination than the solid foundation of proven success. She had convinced herself that her intelligence and ambition would be enough to capture his interest. The conversation had started promisingly enough. Vincent had been polite, even charming as she introduced herself and mentioned her work with the law firm. His green-gray eyes had focused on her face as she spoke about her passion for justice, her plans to specialize in high-stakes defense work. For 10 minutes, she had felt like the most interesting woman in the room. Then Miranda Castellano had appeared at his elbow, petite, blonde, and willowy in the way that fashion magazines celebrated. Miranda moved with the practiced grace of someone who had never doubted her place in elite circles. Her family name carried weight in Chicago. Her trust fund eliminated any need for actual work, and her figure looked carved from marble in her designer gown. "Sophia, I'd like you to meet Miranda Castellano," Vincent had said smoothly. "Miranda, this is Sophia Reeves. She's a lawyer." The dismissal in his tone had been subtle but unmistakable. Miranda's smile had been polite but cool, her gaze sweeping over Sophia's curves with barely concealed judgment. "How interesting," Miranda had murmured. "Vincent was just telling me how he admires women who take care of themselves, who understand the importance of presentation in professional settings." The words had hung in the air like poison. Sophia had felt her cheeks burn as she realized the implication. Vincent's slight nod of agreement had been the knife that twisted in her chest. "I appreciate dedication in all forms," he had said carefully, "but I find I'm drawn to women who share my commitment to discipline. In business and in life." The message had been crystal clear. Sophia, with her size 14 figure and confident curves, did not meet his standards. She was dismissed as surely as if he had told her to leave. She had excused herself with as much dignity as she could muster, but not before catching the smug satisfaction in Miranda's expression. The bathroom had become her refuge for the next 20 minutes, as she fought back tears of humiliation and rage. That night had changed everything. Sophia had thrown herself into her work with a fury that surprised even her ambitious nature. Every case became a battlefield, every victory a step toward the kind of success that would make men like Vincent Torino regret their short-sightedness. The jury foreman's voice brought Sophia back to the present. "We find the defendant not guilty on all charges." The courtroom erupted. Sophia's client sobbed with relief as reporters scrambled for the best angle. Another victory for Sophia Reeves, the defense attorney who rarely lost and never backed down. Her fees had tripled since that night 3 years ago. Her client list included politicians, celebrities, and business leaders who needed someone with her particular combination of brilliance and tenacity. She had proven that she was a force to be reckoned with. What she had not expected was that Vincent Torino would need to be reminded of that fact. Her assistant Keisha was waiting outside the courthouse, her expression urgent despite the celebration surrounding them. Keisha had been with Sophia for 18 months, a recent law school graduate who handled everything from research to scheduling with impressive efficiency. "Great win in there, but we need to talk," Keisha said quietly, falling into step beside Sophia as they navigated through the crowd of reporters and well-wishers. Sophia signed autographs and answered questions with practiced ease, but her attention was already shifting to whatever crisis required immediate attention. In her experience, the most urgent matters were often the most interesting. They reached Sophia's black BMW in the parking garage before Keisha spoke again. "You're not going to believe who called the office this morning." Sophia raised an eyebrow as she settled into the driver's seat. Her assistant's talent for dramatic timing was both annoying and endearing. "Vincent Torino," Keisha continued, sliding into the passenger seat. "As in the Vincent Torino, the one who owns half of downtown, and probably the other half too." Sophia's hands stilled on the steering wheel. She had not heard that name spoken aloud in months, though it still appeared in the financial sections of newspapers with regularity. The Torino family businesses continued to expand, their influence growing despite persistent rumors about their methods. "What did he want?" Sophia asked, proud of how steady her voice remained. "He's been arrested. Federal charges. Money laundering, racketeering, conspiracy. His current attorney is James Morrison from Morrison, Blackwell and Associates. Apparently, Morrison called our office this morning begging for a consultation." Sophia started the engine, her mind already processing the implications. Morrison was competent but uninspired, the kind of lawyer who handled routine corporate matters but had never faced serious federal prosecution. If Vincent was looking beyond his current representation, the charges must be more serious than the news reports suggested. "What exactly did Morrison say?" "That his client specifically requested you. By name." Morrison admitted he's in over his head and needs someone with your expertise in federal defense work. The irony was not lost on Sophia. 3 years ago, Vincent Torino had dismissed her as beneath his notice. Now he needed her expertise to keep him out of federal prison. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. They drove in silence through Chicago traffic as Sophia weighed her options. Her professional reputation was built on taking cases other attorneys considered impossible and winning them anyway. A high-profile federal case with a defendant like Vincent would generate massive media attention and establish her as one of the premier defense attorneys in the country. On the other hand, working with Vincent meant confronting a past humiliation she had spent 3 years trying to forget. It meant sitting across from the man who had made her feel small and worthless at a time when her confidence was still fragile. Did Morrison say anything else? He mentioned that Torino is being held at the Metropolitan Correctional Center pending arraignment. Bail hearing is set for Monday. Morrison sounded desperate. "Sophia, like this case is way beyond anything he's handled before." Sophia pulled into her office parking lot, her decision crystallizing. Professional integrity demanded that she at least review the case details before making a final choice. Personal satisfaction suggested that there might be something deeply gratifying about having Vincent Torino need her help after he had rejected her so thoroughly. "Set up a meeting with Morrison for this afternoon," she told Keisha as they walked toward the gleaming glass building that housed Sophia's practice. "And get me everything you can find about the federal case against Torino." I want to know exactly what he's facing before I decide whether to take this on. Her office suite occupied the 15th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered spectacular views of Lake Michigan. Sophia had designed the space to reflect her success: modern furniture, original artwork, law books that represented years of study and experience. Every detail conveyed competence, sophistication, and the kind of prosperity that commanded respect. The afternoon meeting with James Morrison confirmed Sophia's suspicions about the case's complexity. Morrison was a thin, nervous man in his late 50s who had built his reputation on real estate law and corporate mergers. Federal criminal defense was far outside his comfort zone. The evidence is substantial, Morrison admitted, spreading files across Sophia's conference table. Financial records, wire transfers, surveillance photos. The prosecution claims they can trace money laundering operations back 5 years. Sophia reviewed the documents with growing interest. The case was indeed complex, but not impossible. The prosecution's evidence was largely circumstantial, built on financial patterns that could have innocent explanations with the right presentation. She had won cases with worse odds. What does your client say about these allegations? He maintains his innocence completely. Claims he's been set up by rival business interests. Morrison rubbed his forehead wearily. Honestly, Sophia, I'm not equipped for this kind of fight. The federal prosecutors are aggressive, the media attention is intense, and my client, well, he's not an easy man to work with. Has he actually requested me specifically, or is that your suggestion? Morrison's expression was uncomfortable. He asked for you by name after his arraignment yesterday. Said he needed someone who understood how to fight when the odds were stacked against them. Someone with your particular reputation. Sophia felt a familiar surge of professional pride mixed with personal vindication. Vincent Torino needed her now. The man who had dismissed her as unworthy was asking for her help when his freedom depended on having the best possible representation. I'll need to meet with him before making any final decisions, she told Morrison. Arrange a consultation at the detention center for tomorrow morning. And I'll need complete access to all case files and evidence. Morrison's relief was visible. You'll take the case? I'll consider it after speaking with your client. If I do decide to represent him, there will be conditions. I lead the defense completely, with full authority over strategy and decision-making. No interference from family members or business associates. Morrison nodded eagerly. Whatever you need. The family is desperate to get him the best possible representation. Sophia walked Morrison to the elevator, her mind already working through the implications of taking such a high-profile case. Her reputation could only benefit from a successful defense of Vincent Torino, but failure would be equally public and potentially devastating. More importantly, she would finally have the chance to face Vincent as his equal. Better than his equal, actually, since his freedom would depend entirely on her skills and dedication. The woman he had dismissed 3 years ago was now his only hope for avoiding decades in federal prison. The evening news led with footage of Vincent's arrest, showing him in handcuffs being led from his downtown office building. Even under such circumstances, he maintained his composure and dignity, his expression revealing nothing of whatever emotions he might be experiencing. Sophia studied his face on her television screen, looking for signs of the arrogance that had so wounded her years earlier. Instead, she saw a man facing the possibility of losing everything he had built, everything that defined his place in the world. Tomorrow she would see him again for the first time since that humiliating night. This time, however, she would be the one with all the power, and he would be the one asking for help. The thought should have felt more satisfying than it did. Sophia chose her outfit with the precision of a general preparing for battle. The charcoal gray Armani suit fit her curves perfectly, tailored to accentuate her hourglass figure while projecting unquestionable authority. She paired it with her favorite heels, the ones that added 3 inches to her 5'6" frame and clicked with satisfying authority against hardwood floors. Her makeup was flawless, her hair swept into an elegant chignon that emphasized the graceful line of her neck. She wanted Vincent Torino to see exactly what he had dismissed 3 years ago. More importantly, she wanted him to understand that the woman sitting across from him today held his future in her perfectly manicured hands. The Metropolitan Correctional Center squatted like a concrete fortress in downtown Chicago, its windows narrow slits that seemed designed to remind visitors that this was a place where freedom came to die. Sophia had visited clients here dozens of times, but she never quite got used to the institutional smell of disinfectant and desperation that permeated every surface. Security procedures were thorough and humbling by design. Sophia submitted to the metal detector, surrendered her purse and briefcase for inspection, and accepted the visitor's badge that marked her as an outsider in this controlled environment. She followed the corrections officer through a series of locked doors, each one closing behind her with a finality that made her chest tighten slightly. The attorney meeting room was small and sterile, containing only a metal table bolted to the floor and 4 uncomfortable chairs. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows that flattered no one. Sophia arranged her legal pads and files with deliberate precision, creating a workspace that radiated competence and control. She was reviewing financial documents when the door opened again. Vincent Torino had always commanded attention, but seeing him in the orange jumpsuit of federal detention was jarring in ways Sophia had not expected. The expensive suits and custom shoes were gone, replaced by institutional clothing that somehow managed to diminish even his impressive frame. His dark hair was still perfectly styled, his face cleanly shaven, but there was something different about his posture, his expression. He looked humbled in a way that she had never seen before. Their eyes met across the small space, and Sophia felt her breath catch despite her determination to remain professionally detached. 3 years had only refined his masculine appeal, adding subtle lines around his eyes that spoke of experience and responsibility. Even in prison clothing, he moved with the fluid confidence of someone accustomed to being in control. "Sophia," he said, and her name sounded different in his voice than she remembered. Softer somehow, more respectful. "Mr. Torino," she replied coolly, not rising from her chair. "Please sit down so we can discuss your legal situation." He took the chair across from her, his green-gray eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her skin warm despite the air conditioning. She watched him take in her transformation, the confidence and success she now wore like armor, the unmistakable signs of a woman who had claimed her place in the world. "You look incredible," he said quietly, and there was genuine admiration in his voice. "Successful, powerful, everything I should have recognized 3 years ago." Sophia kept her expression neutral, though inside she felt a surge of vindication mixed with something more complicated. "We're not here to discuss personal history, Mr. Torino. Your attorney has asked me to consult on your federal case. I've reviewed the initial evidence, and I have questions." She opened the first file with practiced efficiency, spreading documents across the table between them. The charges were serious: money laundering, racketeering, conspiracy to commit fraud. If convicted, Vincent faced decades in federal prison, possibly life. "The prosecution claims they can trace suspicious financial transactions through your businesses over the past 5 years, Sophia continued, her voice crisp and professional. "Transfers that appear designed to obscure the source and destination of significant amounts of money." Vincent leaned forward slightly, his attention focused completely on her words. "It's a setup, Sophia. Every transaction they're questioning was legitimate business, but someone has been very careful to make it look otherwise." "Someone being?" "The Castellano family. Miranda's father, specifically. They've been trying to move into our territory for months, and when we refused to negotiate, they apparently decided to eliminate the competition through other means." Sophia made notes, her mind already working through the implications. The Castellano family had the resources and connections to manipulate evidence, especially if they had federal agents willing to look the other way. But proving a frame-up required more than allegations. "Do you have any evidence of Castellano involvement in planting this evidence?" Vincent's jaw tightened with frustration. "Nothing concrete. But the timing is too convenient, and the financial patterns they're claiming to see. Someone with intimate knowledge of our operations would have to be involved to create such convincing documentation." Sophia studied his face, looking for signs of deception or evasion. She had developed an instinct for reading clients over the years, learning to distinguish between legitimate innocence and sophisticated lies. Vincent's anger seemed genuine, his frustration palpable. "The evidence against you is substantial," she told him bluntly. "Financial records, surveillance photos, witness statements. even if this is a frame-up, proving that in court will require more than your word against theirs. I know. Vincent ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that seemed unconscious and vulnerable. That's why I asked for you specifically, Sophia. You're the best federal defense attorney in Chicago, maybe in the Midwest. If anyone can find the holes in their case, it's you. The compliment was professional and deserved, but Sophia found herself studying his expression for any sign of the condescension she remembered from their previous encounter. Instead, she saw something that looked remarkably like respect, even admiration. Why me specifically? She asked, unable to resist the question that had been nagging at her since Morrison's call. You could afford any attorney in the country. Why ask for someone you barely know? Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his gaze dropping to the table between them. When he looked up again, his expression was more open than she had ever seen it. Because 3 years ago, I was an idiot. Vincent's voice was steady but quiet, and Sophia found herself leaning forward despite her determination to maintain professional distance. I looked at you and saw only what I thought I wanted, instead of seeing who you actually were. You were brilliant then, and you're even more impressive now. If I'm going to trust my life to someone, I want it to be someone who understands what it means to be underestimated. Sophia felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the anger she had carried for 3 years. His apology was more genuine than anything she had expected, devoid of the casual arrogance she remembered. But professional caution warred with personal satisfaction. Taking Vincent's case would mean months of intensive work, constant media attention, and the pressure of defending someone whose guilt or innocence remained unclear. It would also mean working closely with a man who had once hurt her deeply, navigating the complicated emotions that his presence seemed to awaken. I haven't agreed to take your case, she reminded him, though her tone was less cold than before. This is a consultation. I need to understand the full scope of the charges and evidence before making any decision. I understand. Vincent's hands rested flat on the table, and Sophia found herself noticing their strength, the way his fingers moved as he spoke. What do you need from me? Complete honesty about your business dealings, your family's operations, and any potential enemies who might have the resources to orchestrate this kind of frame-up. If I take this case, I need to know everything, not just what you think will help your defense. Vincent nodded slowly. There are things about my family's business that I've never discussed with outsiders, Sophia. Things that could be dangerous for you to know. Then perhaps you should find an attorney who's more comfortable operating in the dark, Sophia replied sharply. I don't defend clients by playing guessing games with the truth. You're right. Vincent's admission surprised her with its immediacy. If you take this case, I'll tell you everything. My family's history, our current operations, the details of every business relationship that might be relevant. You'll know more about the Torino organization than anyone outside the family ever has. Sophia made more notes, her mind working through the logistics of mounting such a defense. The case would require extensive investigation, probably involving private detectives and financial experts. The media attention would be intense, and the prosecution would fight aggressively to maintain their narrative. If I agree to represent you, there will be conditions, she said finally. I lead the defense strategy completely, with no interference from you or your family. You don't make public statements, you don't discuss the case with anyone except me or my staff, and you follow my instructions precisely regarding your behavior and appearance. Vincent's slight smile was the first she had seen since he entered the room. You want complete control. I want to win, Mr. Torino. And that requires that you trust my judgment even when it conflicts with your instincts or preferences. He was quiet for a moment, studying her face with an intensity that made her aware of every detail of their proximity. The table between them suddenly seemed smaller, the institutional setting fading into the background as something electric and dangerous sparked in the space between them. You're remarkable, he said quietly, and the simple statement hit her with unexpected force. I should have seen it 3 years ago. Your intelligence, your strength, your beauty. I was blind and arrogant, and I've regretted it every day since. Sophia felt her professional composure waver as his words awakened feelings she had thought safely buried. The attraction that had drawn her to him initially was still there, intensified by the success and confidence she now possessed. But desire was complicated by anger, satisfaction, and the undeniable power dynamic that now favored her completely. Mr. Torino, She began, but he interrupted gently. Vincent, if you're going to save my life, I think we can dispense with formalities. She reached for another file, needing the distraction of legal documents to steady herself. As she did, her hand brushed against his, skin against skin for just a moment. The contact was brief but electric, sending warmth racing up her arm in a way that made her breath catch. Vincent felt it too. She could see it in the way his eyes darkened, the slight intake of breath that matched her own. For a heartbeat, the sterile meeting room disappeared, leaving only the two of them and the complicated history that bound them together. Sophia pulled her hand back, professional training reasserting itself even as her pulse quickened. This was exactly the kind of complication that could destroy a defense case and her reputation along with it. Attraction to a client was not just unprofessional, it was potentially catastrophic. I'll need 3 days to review all the evidence and consult with my team, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. If I decide to take your case, I'll have Morrison file the necessary paperwork to add me as co-counsel. In the meantime, you should prepare yourself for the possibility that this process will be long, difficult, and very public. Vincent nodded, but his attention seemed focused more on her face than on her words. Whatever you decide, Sophia, I want you to know that asking for your help isn't just about legal strategy. It's about having someone I trust, someone I respect, fighting for my freedom. The sincerity in his voice threatened to undo the professional barriers she was desperately trying to maintain. Sophia gathered her files with deliberate efficiency, needing to escape the charged atmosphere of the small room before she said or did something that compromised them both. I'll be in touch with Morrison by Friday, she told him, rising from her chair. If I take your case, our next meeting will be here on Monday to begin preparing for your bail hearing. Vincent stood as well, and suddenly the room felt even smaller, the air between them thick with unspoken possibilities. Thank you for considering it, Sophia. Regardless of what you decide, seeing you today, it means more than you know. Sophia left the detention center with her mind in turmoil and her body still humming with awareness from that brief moment of contact. Vincent Torino was supposed to represent a professional opportunity and personal vindication, nothing more. The fact that he was still the most magnetically attractive man she had ever encountered was a complication she would have to find a way to manage. Sophia's law office transformed into a war room within 48 hours of accepting Vincent's case. 3 of her best associates worked around the clock, their desks covered with financial records, surveillance photos, and witness statements. The conference room walls were papered with timeline charts and organizational flowcharts that mapped the alleged money laundering operation in intricate detail. Coffee cups and takeout containers littered every surface, testament to the team's dedication to mounting an aggressive defense. Keisha coordinated the investigation with military precision, hiring private detectives to dig into Castellano family business dealings and financial experts to analyze the prosecution's evidence for inconsistencies. Every document, every transaction, every witness statement was scrutinized for the flaws that would unravel the government's case. Sophia found herself at the detention center almost daily, spending hours with Vincent reviewing strategy and evidence. What had begun as professional consultation evolved into something deeper as she witnessed his sharp intellect and strategic thinking firsthand. Vincent might be physically confined, but his mind remained formidable, offering insights into financial patterns and business relationships that proved invaluable to their defense preparation. He understood the charges against him with a clarity that impressed her. More importantly, he grasped the legal strategy she was developing and offered suggestions that demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of federal criminal procedure. Working with him was like collaborating with a colleague rather than simply representing a client. The prosecution's case relies heavily on establishing a pattern of structured transactions designed to avoid federal reporting requirements, Sophia explained during one of their afternoon meetings, spreading bank records across the metal table between them. They claim these small, frequent deposits and withdrawals demonstrate intent to conceal the source of funds. Vincent studied the documents with the focused attention of someone whose freedom depended on understanding every detail. But look at the timing, Sophia. These transactions correspond exactly to our legitimate construction contracts. We were managing cash flow for multiple projects simultaneously, all with different payment schedules from different clients. Sophia made notes, her respect for his analytical abilities growing with each session. You're right. The pattern makes perfect sense when viewed as business operations rather than money laundering. We can demonstrate legitimate business reasons for every transaction they're questioning. Their working relationship was professional and productive, but Sophia found herself increasingly aware of Vincent as a man rather than simply a client. He was unfailingly courteous to the corrections officers, patient with delays and bureaucratic frustrations, and grateful for her efforts in a way that seemed genuine rather than calculated. The arrogance she remembered from their first encounter was nowhere in evidence, replaced by a humility that made him far more attractive than she wanted to admit. 3 weeks into their collaboration, Sophia arrived at the detention center with a stack of legal strategy books tucked under her arm alongside the usual case files. Vincent noticed immediately, his eyebrows rising with curiosity. Research material, she explained, setting the books on the table between them. Federal defense strategies, precedent cases, tactical approaches that might be relevant to your situation. I thought you might find them interesting. Vincent picked up the top volume, a comprehensive analysis of successful RICO defenses, and thumbed through the pages with obvious appreciation. You brought me reading material? The genuine pleasure in his voice caught Sophia off guard. It was such a simple gesture, but his reaction suggested it meant far more to him than she had anticipated. She found herself wondering how many visitors he received, whether anyone else thought to bring him books or anything that might make his confinement more bearable. I know how much you value understanding every aspect of your situation, she said, slightly embarrassed by his gratitude. I thought you might appreciate having something constructive to do between our meetings. Vincent's smile was soft and genuine, transforming his face in a way that made Sophia's pulse quicken despite her determination to maintain professional boundaries. Thank you, Sophia. You have no idea how much this means to me. The days are long when you're used to being active, being in control of your environment. She found herself curious about his experience of confinement. This man who was accustomed to commanding respect and making decisions that affected hundreds of people. How are you managing? Being here, I mean. The restrictions, the loss of control. Vincent was quiet for a moment, considering her question with the thoughtfulness she had come to expect from him. It's harder than I anticipated, he admitted finally. Not the physical conditions, though they're certainly limiting. It's the isolation from everything that matters. My business, my family, the ability to protect the people I care about. There was something vulnerable in his admission that made Sophia see him differently. Behind the powerful reputation and dangerous connections was a man struggling with the fundamental helplessness of incarceration. She felt an unexpected surge of sympathy mixed with something more personal. You mentioned protecting people, she said carefully. Is that what drives you? The need to take care of others? Vincent's expression grew thoughtful, his fingers absently turning pages in the legal text she had brought him. My father died when I was 19, Sophia. Suddenly, unexpectedly, leaving me responsible for our family's businesses and everyone who depended on them for their livelihood. I had to learn quickly that leadership means making hard choices, sometimes choices that others don't understand or approve of. Sophia found herself leaning forward, drawn into his explanation despite her intention to keep their interactions strictly professional. The prosecution paints you as a criminal, but you see yourself as a protector. Vincent's laugh was bitter but not defensive. The line between those things isn't always as clear as people like to believe. In my world, protecting your family and your business sometimes requires methods that wouldn't be approved in corporate boardrooms or law schools. Sophia considered his words, recognizing the moral complexity he was describing. She had defended enough clients to understand that good and evil were rarely as simple as prosecutors like to claim. Vincent's reputation might be dark, but his motivations seemed rooted in loyalty and responsibility rather than simple greed or violence. Tell me about that night, she said suddenly, the question emerging before she could stop herself. 3 years ago at the charity gala. Why did you react the way you did when I approached you? Vincent's expression shifted, becoming pained and regretful. Sophia immediately regretted asking, but he seemed willing to answer, his voice quiet and honest. I was an idiot, he said simply. Young and arrogant and surrounded by people who told me what they thought I wanted to hear. Miranda Castellano represented everything I thought I was supposed to want: connected family, acceptable appearance, the kind of woman who would enhance my image in certain circles. Sophia felt old anger stirring despite her efforts to remain detached, and I didn't fit that image. Vincent's eyes met hers directly, his expression intense and sincere. You were everything I actually needed, Sophia. Intelligent, strong, independent, beautiful in ways I was too stupid to recognize. But I was so focused on maintaining appearances, on meeting expectations I'd inherited from my father and grandfather, that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. His honesty was more disarming than any smooth apology could have been. Sophia felt her carefully maintained walls beginning to crack, emotions she had buried for 3 years surfacing despite her best efforts to keep them contained. Your rejection motivated me to succeed, she told him, surprised by her own willingness to share something so personal. Every case I won, every victory in court, part of it was proving that you were wrong about me, that I was worth more than you realized. Vincent's expression was pained. I've thought about that night every day for 3 years, Sophia. Wondered what would have happened if I'd been smart enough to see you clearly, brave enough to ignore the opinions of people who didn't matter. I've regretted it more than any decision I've ever made. The confession hung between them like a bridge, offering connection across the professional distance Sophia had been trying to maintain. She found herself studying his face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculated charm, but seeing only genuine remorse and something that might have been longing. Before she could respond, Vincent continued, his voice even quieter. You want to know the truth? I was attracted to you that night, more attracted than I'd ever been to anyone. That's what scared me. Miranda was safe, predictable, approved by everyone who mattered to my family's reputation. You were dangerous because you made me want things I wasn't ready to want. Sophia's breath caught at his admission. The attraction she had felt that night hadn't been one-sided after all. He had been drawn to her, but had chosen safety and appearances over genuine connection. The knowledge was both vindication and renewed pain. Their eyes met across the small table, and Sophia felt the air between them grow charged with possibility and regret. She wanted to be angry with him, to maintain the professional boundaries that protected her from further hurt. But his honesty was undermining her defenses, making her remember the attraction that had brought her to him in the first place. The moment was broken by Keisha's urgent phone call. Sophia answered reluctantly, immediately noting the tension in her assistant's voice. Sophia, we have a problem, Keisha said without preamble. I just got a call from Marcus Webb at the prosecutor's office. Someone's been asking questions about you, about your involvement in the Torino case. They mentioned your office address, your home address, details that aren't public information. Sophia felt ice form in her stomach as the implications became clear. Someone was investigating her personally, which meant someone was concerned about her effectiveness in defending Vincent. The Castellano family had noticed her involvement. Are you safe? Vincent asked immediately, reading her expression despite hearing only her side of the conversation. Sophia ended the call and looked at him, seeing genuine concern rather than calculation in his eyes. Someone's been asking questions about me. Personal questions that suggest they know more about my life than they should. Vincent's expression darkened with anger that seemed to radiate from him like heat. The Castellanos. They're trying to intimidate you into dropping my case. Sophia felt her own anger rise to match his. If they think threats are going to make me back down, they obviously haven't done their research properly. I don't scare easily, Mr. Torino. Vincent leaned forward, his voice intense and urgent. Sophia, you don't understand what you're dealing with. These people have resources, connections, and no moral limitations when it comes to protecting their interests. If they see you as a threat to their plan, they'll escalate. Sophia gathered her files with sharp, angry movements. Then they're going to be very disappointed when they realize I'm not going anywhere. I've faced down federal prosecutors, hostile judges, and opposing counsel who would sell their grandmothers for a win. The Castellano family doesn't scare me. This isn't about professional rivalry, Sophia. Vincent's voice was fierce with protectiveness. This is about people who have killed for far less than what's at stake here. I'm firing you from this case. Sophia stopped moving, her files half gathered, and stared at him in disbelief. You're what? I won't have your blood on my hands because I was selfish enough to want the best possible defense. Find me another attorney, someone the Castellanos won't see as a threat. Sophia's anger exploded into fury, 3 years of professional success and personal vindication crystallizing into pure indignation. You arrogant, controlling, impossibly frustrating man. You don't get to fire me because you've decided I'm too delicate to handle the consequences of doing my job properly. Vincent stood as well, their argument suddenly intensely personal despite the institutional setting. This isn't about your competence, Sophia. This is about keeping you alive. And this isn't about your nobility, Vincent. Sophia stepped closer to him, her own voice rising to match his intensity. This is about you trying to control a situation where you have no power, where you have to trust someone else to save you. They were standing close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his green-gray eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body despite the cool air of the meeting room. The argument had stripped away their professional facades, revealing the raw emotion beneath their careful politeness. I trust you completely, Vincent said, his voice dropping to something urgent and intimate. That's exactly why I can't let you risk yourself for me. Sophia felt her anger transform into something more dangerous, something that had been building since their first meeting in this sterile room. You don't get to make that choice for me, she told him, her voice barely above a whisper. I decide what risks are worth taking, and defending you is worth any risk they can threaten. The space between them seemed to disappear without either of them moving. Sophia could feel Vincent's breath on her face, could see the way his pupils dilated as he looked at her. The attraction that had simmered beneath their professional interactions suddenly blazed into something urgent and undeniable. Sophia, he breathed, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a curse combined. For one heartbeat, one suspended moment, they balanced on the edge of crossing a line that would change everything between them. Then reality crashed back, reminding Sophia exactly where they were and what was at stake. She stepped back, her heart racing and her professional training screaming warnings about the line she had almost crossed. Monday, she said, her voice shakier than she would have liked. I'll be back Monday to continue preparing your defense. And Vincent, you can't fire me. I already filed the paperwork making this official. She left him standing in the meeting room, her entire body humming with awareness and her mind reeling from how quickly their argument had transformed into something far more dangerous and infinitely more complicated. The warning came disguised as a business meeting. Sophia was reviewing depositions in her office when her secretary buzzed the intercom. Ms. Reeves, there's a Mr. Castellano here to see you. He says it's regarding a potential business arrangement. Sophia's blood chilled. She knew exactly which Castellano had come calling, and it wasn't a social visit. Anthony Castellano, Miranda's father and head of one of Chicago's most influential families, didn't make impromptu office visits unless he had something very specific to accomplish. Send him in, Sophia told her secretary, her voice steady despite the adrenaline now coursing through her system. And ask Keisha to join us for the meeting. Anthony Castellano entered her office with the confident stride of a man accustomed to getting his way through intimidation disguised as charm. He was in his late 50s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Two men flanked him, obviously security, their presence designed to reinforce whatever message he planned to deliver. Ms. Reeves, Anthony said, settling into the chair across from her desk without waiting for an invitation. I hope you don't mind the unexpected visit. I was in the neighborhood and thought we should have a conversation about your recent professional choices. Sophia leaned back in her leather chair, projecting calm confidence despite the threat she felt radiating from the three men now occupying her office. Mr. Castellano, what an unexpected pleasure. Though I should mention that all my business conversations are recorded for legal protection. Anthony's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold. Of course. A woman in your position can't be too careful about protecting herself, can she? Which brings me to why I'm here. I understand you've taken on Vincent Torino as a client. Sophia made a note on her legal pad, buying herself time to think while projecting complete professionalism. Mr. Torino's representation is a matter of public record, yes. Is there something specific about the case that concerns you? The older man's laugh was smooth, but entirely without humor. Concerns me? Not exactly. But I would hate to see a talented attorney like yourself become collateral damage in a situation that's already been resolved to everyone's satisfaction. Sophia felt her anger begin to override her caution. The threat was clear despite the polite language, and she had spent too many years building her reputation to be intimidated by thinly veiled warnings. I'm not sure what you're suggesting, Mr. Castellano, but I can assure you that I don't make professional decisions based on outside pressure. Anthony leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to something more intimate and therefore more menacing. Vincent Torino is a dangerous man, Ms. Reeves. His conviction serves the interests of justice and public safety. Sometimes the greater good requires that we allow the legal process to proceed without interference. Sophia set down her pen and met his gaze directly, her own voice taking on the steel that had intimidated prosecutors and judges for years. Mr. Castellano, I think you've misunderstood something fundamental about how the American justice system works. Every defendant, regardless of their reputation or alleged crimes, deserves competent legal representation. That's not interference with justice. That's the foundation of justice. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Anthony's polite facade began to crack. You're young, Ms. Reeves, and idealistic. That's admirable, but it can also be dangerous when applied to situations beyond your understanding. Sophia stood, her height and bearing commanding despite the physical intimidation of the three men facing her. Gentlemen, I think our conversation has concluded. Unless you have legitimate legal business to discuss, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Anthony rose as well, his movements deliberate and threatening. I hope you'll reconsider your position, Ms. Reeves. Chicago can be a dangerous city for people who make the wrong enemies. Sophia walked to her office door and held it open, her message clear despite the politeness of her gesture. Thank you for your visit, Mr. Castellano. I'll be sure to document our conversation for my files. After the three men left, Sophia found her hands shaking slightly as she reached for her phone to call Keisha. The threat had been real and immediate, designed to make her understand exactly what she was up against by defending Vincent. Instead of frightening her, however, the intimidation attempt only strengthened her resolve. Keisha appeared in her doorway within minutes, her expression concerned. I heard everything through the intercom, she said quietly. Should I call the police? Sophia considered the question, then shook her head. Anthony Castellano is too smart to make direct threats that could be prosecuted. He said just enough to make his point without giving U.S. evidence of criminal intimidation. But he did make his point, Keisha observed. He wants you to drop Vincent's case. Then he's going to be disappointed, Sophia replied, her voice hard with determination. Double our investigative team's efforts into Castellano family business dealings. If they're this desperate to keep Vincent in prison, they're hiding something we need to find. Sophia spent the next week working 18-hour days, driven by a combination of professional pride and personal fury that anyone would think they could intimidate her into abandoning a client. Her team expanded their investigation, hiring additional private detectives and forensic accountants to examine every aspect of the Castellano family's financial operations. The breakthrough came on a Friday evening when one of her investigators discovered a pattern of shell companies and offshore accounts that seemed designed to mirror Vincent's legitimate business structure. The transactions were dated precisely to coincide with the activity the prosecution claimed was evidence of money laundering. Sophia stared at the financial records spread across her conference table, her excitement building as the implications became clear. Someone with detailed knowledge of Vincent's business operations had created a parallel structure designed to make his legitimate transactions look suspicious. It was sophisticated, expensive, and required the kind of inside information that only a few people would possess. This is it, she told Keisha, who was reviewing the documents alongside her. This is proof that someone deliberately framed Vincent. The timing, the amounts, the account structures, it's all too precise to be coincidental. Sophia called the detention center immediately, arranging an emergency meeting with Vincent for the following morning. She couldn't wait to see his face when she showed him the evidence that would destroy the prosecution's case. She never made it to that meeting. Sophia woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of her apartment door being forced open. Years of living alone in Chicago had taught her to sleep lightly, and the unusual noise sent adrenaline flooding through her system immediately. She grabbed her phone and pressed herself against the bedroom wall, listening to the sounds of footsteps moving through her living room. The intruders were not particularly concerned with stealth. They wanted her to know they were there, wanted her to understand that her home was no longer safe, that nowhere would be safe if she continued defending Vincent. Sophia called 911 while they ransacked her living room, then called her building's security. By the time police arrived, the intruders were gone, leaving behind an apartment that had been systematically searched and deliberately destroyed. Her couch was slashed, her files scattered, her personal belongings broken and strewn across the floor. The message was unmistakably clear: stop defending Vincent Torino or face escalating consequences. Sophia stood in her ruined living room, surveying the damage while giving her statement to the police officers. Her hands were steady now, her voice calm, but inside she felt a cold fury that threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. The Castellanos had made a fundamental miscalculation. They had assumed that intimidation would make her retreat. Instead, they had just guaranteed that she would fight them with everything she had. She called the detention center from her car, demanding an immediate emergency meeting with Vincent. The corrections officer on duty initially resisted, citing normal visiting hours and procedures, but something in Sophia's voice convinced him to make an exception. Vincent was brought to the attorney meeting room within an hour, his expression shifting from concern to fury as Sophia described the break-in and its obvious connection to the Castellano family's warnings. "They came to my home, Vincent," she told him, her voice tight with controlled anger. "They went through my personal belongings, destroyed my furniture, made it clear that nowhere is safe if I continue defending you." Vincent's expression was darker than anything she had seen from him, a cold rage that made her understand exactly why his reputation inspired fear in Chicago's underworld. "They touched you. They violated your home." "I'm fine," Sophia said quickly, seeing the violence building behind his eyes. "They didn't hurt me, but they made their point about what they're willing to do to stop your defense." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists on the metal table between them. When he spoke, his voice was soft and lethal. "Sophia, I need you to listen to me very carefully. As of this moment, you have protection whether you want it or not. My people are going to watch your apartment, your office, everywhere you go." The Castellanos just made this personal. Sophia felt a complex mix of emotions at his declaration. Part of her bristled at the idea of needing protection, of being seen as vulnerable. But another part, a part she was reluctant to acknowledge, felt relief that Vincent's people would be watching over her. The fear she had refused to show during the break-in was real, even if she wouldn't let it control her decisions. "I also found something," she told him, setting the financial documents on the table between them. "Evidence that proves you were framed. Shell companies, offshore accounts, transaction patterns that mirror your legitimate business operations exactly. Someone with inside knowledge created a parallel structure designed to make your legal activity look criminal." Vincent studied the documents with the focused intensity she had come to expect from him, but she could see that his attention was divided between the evidence and his concern for her safety. "This is incredible work, Sophia. This could destroy their entire case." "It will destroy their case," she corrected him. "Combined with testimony about the intimidation attempts, we can prove prosecutorial misconduct and have the charges dismissed entirely. You could be free within weeks." Vincent looked up from the documents, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "You did this for me. Even after they threatened you, even after they violated your home, you kept fighting." Sophia felt something shift in her chest, a recognition that her motivation for defending Vincent had evolved far beyond professional obligation or personal vindication. Somewhere in the hours of strategy sessions and conversations, somewhere between his genuine remorse and his obvious respect for her abilities, she had begun to care about him in ways that had nothing to do with legal representation. "Vincent," she said quietly, her voice softer than she had intended. "This case stopped being just about legal strategy weeks ago." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers in a gesture that sent warmth racing up her arm. "Sophia, I need to tell you something that I should have said years ago. You're the most beautiful, brilliant, remarkable woman I've ever known. What I feel for you, it's not gratitude or professional respect. It's something much more dangerous than that." Sophia's breath caught at his admission, her professional barriers finally crumbling under the weight of emotions she had been fighting since their first meeting in this sterile room. "Vincent, we can't. I'm your attorney. This is exactly the kind of complication that could destroy your defense." Vincent's thumb traced gentle patterns across her knuckles, his touch both comforting and incendiary. I know all the reasons this is impossible, all the ethical complications, all the ways this could hurt both of us. But sitting in this cell every night, knowing that you're out there risking yourself for me, knowing that I might lose you before I ever tell you how I feel. I can't stay silent anymore." Sophia felt tears threatening, emotions she had suppressed for years finally demanding acknowledgement. "I'm falling in love with you," she whispered, the admission both liberating and terrifying. "I've been fighting it for weeks, telling myself it was just attraction or gratitude or professional admiration. But it's more than that. It's everything I wanted 3 years ago and everything I'm afraid to want now." Vincent lifted their joined hands, pressing his lips to her knuckles in a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. "Sophia, you're perfect. Every curve, every smile, every brilliant argument you make in my defense. I was an idiot to reject what you offered me, and I'll spend the rest of my life making up for that mistake if you'll let me." The barriers between them dissolved as Sophia leaned forward, drawn by a force stronger than professional ethics or practical concerns. Vincent met her halfway, their lips meeting through the small space allowed by the table between them. The kiss was desperate and sweet. 3 years of suppressed longing and weeks of growing attraction compressed into a moment of perfect connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sophia felt as if the world had shifted on its axis. Everything about their situation remained complicated, dangerous, potentially catastrophic for both their futures. But the connection between them was real and undeniable, worth whatever risks they would have to navigate. "I'm going to get you out of here," she told him, her voice fierce with determination and love. "I'm going to destroy their case, get you released on bail, and then we're going to figure out how to make this work between us." Vincent's smile was soft and genuine, transforming his face with hope she hadn't seen before. "I love you, Sophia. Whatever happens with the case, whatever complications we have to face, I want you to know that loving you is the smartest thing I've done in years." Sophia gathered her files and evidence with steady hands, her mind already working through the legal strategy that would free the man she loved. The Castellanos had made one critical error in their campaign of intimidation. They had assumed that threatening her would make her retreat. Instead, they had just guaranteed that she would fight for Vincent's freedom with everything she had, because now it wasn't just about justice or professional victory. It was about love, and Sophia had learned that love was worth any risk they could threaten. The federal courthouse buzzed with anticipation as Sophia entered the building for Vincent's bail hearing. Media crews lined the steps, reporters shouting questions about her defense strategy and the mysterious evidence she had promised to present. Sophia moved through the chaos with practiced grace, her burgundy power suit commanding attention and respect in equal measure. Every detail of her appearance was calculated to project confidence and competence. Her hair swept into an elegant updo, her makeup flawless, her bearing regal. She carried herself like a queen entering her throne room, and everyone present seemed to sense that they were about to witness something extraordinary. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity, with spectators filling every available seat and standing along the walls. Vincent's family occupied the front rows, their expensive suits and obvious wealth marking them as people of influence. The Castellano family sat across the aisle, their presence a reminder of the powerful forces aligned against Vincent's freedom. Sophia felt the weight of every gaze as she arranged her files at the defense table, but she thrived under pressure. This was her element, the place where her intelligence and preparation transformed into something approaching artistry. Judge Margaret Harrison entered with the no-nonsense bearing that had made her one of the most respected jurists in the federal system. Sophia had appeared before Harrison twice before, winning both cases through meticulous preparation and compelling argumentation. The judge's reputation for fairness gave Sophia hope, but she knew that even sympathetic judges required overwhelming evidence to overturn prosecutorial recommendations. Vincent was brought in wearing the standard orange jumpsuit, but he moved with a dignity that transcended his circumstances. His eyes found Sophia immediately, and she saw pride and love reflected there. He believed in her completely, trusted her with his life and freedom in ways that made her chest tighten with emotion. The prosecution presented their arguments first, Assistant District Attorney Marcus Webb outlining the money laundering charges with the methodical thoroughness that had built his career. The evidence seemed damning when presented without context. Financial records showing structured transactions, witness statements describing suspicious behavior, surveillance photos documenting meetings with known criminals. Sophia listened with the focused attention of a predator studying prey, noting every weakness in Webb's presentation, every assumption that could be challenged, every gap in logic that could be exploited. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and she was ready to dismantle the prosecution's case piece by methodical piece. When Judge Harrison called for the defense's response, Sophia rose with the fluid confidence that had become her trademark. She moved to the podium like a dancer taking the stage, her presence immediately commanding the attention of everyone in the courtroom. "Your Honor," she began, her voice carrying easily through the packed room. "The prosecution has presented what appears to be a compelling case against my client. Financial records, witness statements, surveillance evidence. But as this court knows, appearances can be deceiving, especially when those appearances have been carefully constructed by people with the resources and motivation to manufacture false evidence." Sophia moved away from the podium, walking closer to the judge's bench in a gesture that created intimacy despite the formal setting. "What I am about to present to this court will demonstrate that Vincent Torino is not a criminal who has evaded justice, but rather an innocent man who has become the victim of an elaborate frame-up orchestrated by his business rivals." She returned to the defense table and retrieved the first set of documents, her movements deliberate and confident. These financial records, which the prosecution claims demonstrate money laundering activity, actually reveal something far more sinister. Someone with intimate knowledge of my client's legitimate business operations created a parallel structure of shell companies and offshore accounts designed to mirror his legal transactions exactly. Sophia distributed copies to the judge and prosecution, her voice gaining strength as she outlined the evidence her team had discovered. "The timing is too precise to be coincidental, Your Honor. Every transaction the prosecution has identified as suspicious corresponds exactly with legitimate construction contracts, real estate purchases, and business operations that can be documented and verified." Webb objected immediately, claiming the defense was introducing evidence not disclosed during discovery, but Sophia was prepared for his challenge. She produced time-stamped communications proving that her investigators had discovered the shell company structure only after the Castellano family's intimidation attempts had begun. "Furthermore, Your Honor," Sophia continued, her voice taking on the steel that had intimidated prosecutors throughout her career, "the timing of these intimidation attempts reveals the true purpose behind the prosecution of my client. Within hours of my team discovering evidence that would exonerate Mr. Torino, representatives of the Castellano family visited my office with thinly veiled threats designed to discourage my continued investigation." She presented sworn affidavits from her secretary and assistant, security footage from her office building, and a detailed timeline connecting the Castellanos' threats to the discovery of exonerating evidence. Each document was a nail in the prosecution's coffin, proof that powerful interests were working to keep Vincent imprisoned. Judge Harrison studied the evidence with the careful attention Sophia had hoped for, her expression revealing nothing but her questions growing more pointed as the presentation continued. The financial analysis was particularly damning, showing that the alleged money laundering transactions followed patterns that exactly matched Vincent's legitimate business cycles. Finally, Sophia presented the most devastating evidence: recorded conversations between known Castellano associates discussing the frame-up in detail. The recordings had been obtained legally through ongoing federal investigations into Castellano family activities, but had been mysteriously omitted from the discovery materials provided to Vincent's original attorney. "Your Honor," Sophia concluded, her voice ringing with conviction, "my client has been the victim of prosecutorial misconduct at best and active conspiracy at worst. The evidence clearly demonstrates that powerful interests have manipulated the federal justice system to eliminate a business rival through false imprisonment. I respectfully request that all charges be dismissed and that my client be released immediately. The courtroom was silent as Judge Harrison reviewed the evidence, the weight of Sophia's presentation settling over everyone present like a physical force. Webb attempted a rebuttal, but his arguments sounded hollow and desperate in the face of the documentation Sophia had provided. When Judge Harrison finally spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had seen enough corruption to recognize it immediately. In 30 years on the federal bench, she said, her words crisp and clear, I have rarely seen such a systematic attempt to manipulate the justice system for personal gain. The evidence presented by the defense demonstrates not only reasonable doubt about Mr. Torino's guilt, but positive proof of his innocence. Sophia felt her heart soar as the judge continued. All charges against Vincent Torino are hereby dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Torino, you are free to go, and you have my sincere apologies for the injustice you have suffered. The courtroom erupted in chaos as reporters rushed for their phones and Vincent's family celebrated with tears and embraces. Sophia felt hands clapping her shoulders, voices congratulating her on the most spectacular defense performance anyone could remember. But her attention was focused entirely on Vincent, who was staring at her with an expression of awe and love that made her pulse race. Within an hour, Vincent walked out of the federal courthouse as a free man for the first time in 2 months. Sophia waited on the steps, having changed from her courtroom suit into a simple black dress that emphasized her curves and confidence. When Vincent emerged in the expensive clothes his family had brought for him, he looked like the powerful man she remembered from 3 years ago, but with a humility and gratitude that made him infinitely more attractive. Their embrace on the courthouse steps was captured by dozens of cameras, but Sophia didn't care about the publicity. Vincent's arms around her felt like coming home after a long and dangerous journey. He held her like she was precious, irreplaceable, the most important thing in his world. Thank you, he whispered against her ear, his voice rough with emotion. You gave me back my life, my freedom, my future. I'll never be able to repay what you've done for me. Sophia pulled back enough to meet his eyes, her own voice soft but firm. You don't owe me anything, Vincent. What I did because I love you. Because you deserve justice and freedom and happiness. They drove to Sophia's apartment in Vincent's car, a sleek black sedan that his driver had brought to the courthouse. The silence between them was charged with anticipation and awareness, 3 months of suppressed desire finally free to be acknowledged and explored. Sophia's apartment had been meticulously restored since the break-in, her insurance company and Vincent's people working together to replace everything that had been damaged. But walking into the space with Vincent beside her felt different from anything she had experienced before. This was the first time they had been truly alone together, free from the institutional constraints and professional obligations that had defined their relationship until now. Vincent moved through her living room with the careful attention of someone memorizing details, taking in the books on her shelves, the artwork on her walls, the personal touches that revealed who she was beyond the courtroom. Sophia watched him explore her space, feeling vulnerable and exposed in ways that had nothing to do with physical intimacy. You have incredible taste, he said finally, stopping in front of a painting she had bought during a vacation in Italy. Everything here reflects who you are. Strong, sophisticated, beautiful. Sophia moved to stand beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. I've spent years building this life, proving that I could be successful and independent. Meeting you again, falling in love with you, it changes everything I thought I wanted. Vincent turned to face her, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite gentleness. Sophia, what we have doesn't diminish your independence or your success. It enhances it. You're not losing yourself by loving me. You're becoming more yourself than you've ever been. Their kiss was different from the desperate connection they had shared in the detention center. This was slow and thorough, a claiming and surrender that acknowledged the depth of feeling between them. Sophia felt herself melting into Vincent's embrace, her body responding to his touch with an intensity that made her breath catch. When he lifted her in his arms, carrying her toward the bedroom with confident strength, Sophia felt no hesitation or doubt. This was right, inevitable, the culmination of months of building trust and desire. Vincent set her down beside the bed with reverent care, his hands gentle as he helped her out of her dress. "You're perfect," he whispered, his voice rough with desire and tenderness. "Every curve, every inch of your skin, every brilliant thought in your beautiful mind. I've dreamed about you, for months." Their lovemaking was passionate but patient, Vincent worshiping her body with a reverence that made Sophia feel cherished and desired in ways she had never experienced before. He took his time learning what pleased her, responding to her needs with the focused attention she had come to expect from him in all things. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in her sheets, Sophia felt a contentment that went beyond physical satisfaction. Vincent's arms around her felt like safety and home, his presence beside her the missing piece she hadn't realized she was looking for. "I love you," she whispered against his chest, the words still new enough to feel miraculous. "I love you too," he replied, his voice carrying promises of forever that made her heart race with hope and possibility. "More than I ever thought I was capable of loving anyone." The next few weeks passed in a blur of media interviews, legal follow-up, and the intensive background checks required for Sophia to be accepted into Vincent's world. His family was initially skeptical of their relationship, traditional expectations clashing with the reality of his feelings for her. But Sophia's intelligence and strength won over even his most conservative relatives, her success commanding respect that transcended their initial prejudices. The Castellano family's final desperate gambit came 3 weeks after Vincent's release, when masked gunmen attempted to ambush Sophia outside her office building. Vincent's security team, which had been protecting her since the break-in, neutralized the threat with efficiency that reminded Sophia exactly how dangerous Vincent's world could be. She watched from behind bulletproof glass as Vincent coordinated the response with his security chief, his voice cold and precise as he gave orders that would eliminate the Castellano threat permanently. This was the other side of the man she loved, the dangerous edge that made him both protector and predator, depending on the circumstances. The Castellano family's business empire collapsed within days as federal investigators, armed with the evidence Sophia had uncovered, swept through their operations with surgical precision. Anthony Castellano and 6 family members were arrested on charges ranging from conspiracy to attempted murder, their carefully constructed facade of respectability crumbling under the weight of documented criminal activity. Sophia and Vincent worked together as partners now, combining her legal expertise with his business acumen to expand both their professional horizons. She maintained her independence and her practice, but their lives became intertwined in ways that enhanced rather than diminished their individual strengths. 6 months after Vincent's release, as they planned their future together, Sophia reflected on how completely her life had changed. The woman who had been humiliated at a charity gala 3 years earlier had not only proven her worth professionally, but had found love with the man who had once rejected her. Vincent's transformation was equally remarkable. The arrogant young man who had dismissed her based on appearances had become someone who cherished every aspect of who she was, supporting her career and celebrating her successes with genuine pride and love. Their relationship proved that second chances, when built on genuine respect and deep feeling, could create something more beautiful than anything either of them had imagined possible. 6 months later, Sophia stood in her expanded law office, watching Chicago's skyline glitter in the afternoon sunlight. Her practice had tripled in size since Vincent's case, with high-profile clients seeking her representation and legal publications featuring her courtroom strategies. The Torino defense had established her as one of the premier federal criminal attorneys in the country, but more importantly, it had given her something she hadn't realized she was searching for. Vincent knocked softly on her office door, carrying 2 cups of coffee and the morning newspapers that featured yet another article about their professional partnership. His legitimate business ventures had flourished with Sophia as legal counsel, their combined expertise creating opportunities neither could have achieved alone. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, setting her coffee on the antique desk he had bought for her office. "The Tribune wants to interview us about the Morrison Industries merger next week." Sophia accepted the coffee gratefully, her body still adjusting to the early morning meetings that came with expanding her client base. We should probably coordinate our schedules. Your construction contracts with the city require legal review by Friday, and I have that federal appeals case to argue on Thursday. Their domestic routine had evolved naturally over the months, Vincent splitting his time between his downtown penthouse and Sophia's apartment until they finally acknowledged that they preferred being together to being apart. Cooking dinner had become Vincent's domain, while Sophia handled their shared calendar with the organizational skills that made her such an effective attorney. Vincent's family had gradually warmed to Sophia, his mother particularly charmed by her intelligence and strength. Even his traditional uncle had admitted that Sophia brought out the best in Vincent, tempering his occasionally ruthless business instincts with her ethical grounding. Sophia's confidence had blossomed in ways that went beyond professional success. She moved through the world now with the assurance of someone who knew her worth completely, her curves showcased in tailored suits that emphasized her figure rather than hiding it. Vincent's constant admiration and support had helped heal wounds she hadn't realized were still tender. "Tonight is the Children's Hospital Gala," Vincent said carefully, watching her expression for any sign of discomfort. "The same event where we first met 3 years ago. I thought we might attend together this time." Sophia felt a flutter of nerves mixed with anticipation. The annual charity gala had been the site of her greatest humiliation, but it could also represent her complete triumph over the past. Attending with Vincent would demonstrate to everyone present how completely their circumstances had changed. "I think that's perfect," she said, smiling at the symmetry of returning to where their story began. "Though I reserve the right to be smug about how wrong you were about me." Vincent crossed to her chair, spinning it so she faced him before leaning down to kiss her softly. "You have every right to be as smug as you want. I was an idiot, and you've spent 3 years proving exactly how much I underestimated you." That evening, Sophia chose her gown with the same strategic precision she brought to major court cases. The midnight blue silk hugged her curves perfectly, the designer cut emphasizing her hourglass figure, while the elegant lines projected sophistication and success. Her jewelry was Vincent's gift, sapphires that complemented her dress and diamond earrings that caught the light when she moved. Vincent looked magnificent in his custom tuxedo, but Sophia was more interested in the way he looked at her. His gaze held admiration, desire, and love in equal measure, making her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. The Meridian Hotel ballroom was exactly as Sophia remembered it, crystal chandeliers casting rainbows across the crowd of Chicago's elite. But walking in on Vincent's arm felt completely different from her tentative entrance 3 years earlier. This time, people turned to watch their arrival, recognizing her as the brilliant attorney who had dismantled a federal prosecution and Vincent as the man who had won her heart. Miranda Castellano was notably absent, her family's disgrace having eliminated their place in Chicago society. Sophia felt no satisfaction in their downfall, but she couldn't deny the poetic justice of the situation. Vincent guided her through the crowd with protective pride, introducing her to business associates and family friends as his partner in life and law. Sophia's reputation preceded her, with several attendees mentioning cases she had won and articles they had read about her courtroom strategies. The evening was everything the first gala had not been. Sophia belonged here now, not as an outsider seeking acceptance, but as someone who had claimed her place through talent and determination. Vincent never left her side, his attention focused entirely on her despite the numerous people seeking his business counsel. Halfway through the evening, Vincent excused them from a conversation with the mayor and led Sophia toward the balcony overlooking Lake Michigan. The same balcony where she had hidden 3 years earlier, fighting tears of humiliation and rage. "Sophia," he said, taking her hands as they stood alone in the moonlight, "do you remember what I said to you that night 3 years ago?" Sophia's heart began racing as she recognized something significant in his tone, in the way he was looking at her. Every cruel word, unfortunately. "You said you preferred women who took care of themselves, who understood the importance of presentation." Vincent's expression was pained but determined. "I was wrong about everything that mattered. You were perfect then, and you're perfect now. But more than that, you're everything I didn't know I needed. Your strength, your brilliance, your compassion, your incredible beauty inside and out." He dropped to one knee on the balcony where she had once felt so small and worthless, pulling a ring box from his pocket that made Sophia's breath catch in her throat. Sophia Reeves, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I see you clearly now, that I value everything you are? The ring was stunning, a classic solitaire that caught the light from the ballroom behind them. But Sophia's attention was focused entirely on Vincent's face. The man who had once dismissed her was now offering her everything: his love, his future, his complete devotion. Yes, she whispered, tears streaming down her face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Yes, Vincent, I'll marry you. Their kiss was witnessed by several guests who had stepped onto the balcony, and within minutes the news of their engagement was spreading through the ballroom. When they returned to the party, they were surrounded by congratulations and champagne toasts, their love story having captivated Chicago society. Vincent asked for the microphone during the charity auction, his request granted immediately by the event organizers. Sophia stood beside him as he addressed the same crowd that had witnessed her humiliation 3 years earlier. 3 years ago in this very room, Vincent began, his voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. I made one of the worst mistakes of my life. I met an incredible woman and was too blind to see her worth, too arrogant to recognize her beauty, too stupid to appreciate her brilliance. Sophia felt her chest tighten with emotion as Vincent continued, his love and regret evident in every word. Tonight, I want to publicly apologize for that blindness and announce that Sophia Reeves has agreed to become my wife. She saved my life in more ways than one, and I plan to spend forever proving I'm worthy of her love. The applause was thunderous, with several people commenting that they had never seen Vincent so happy or genuine. Sophia felt vindicated in ways she hadn't realized she needed. Her public humiliation transformed into public celebration. Have any of you ever experienced a love story that started with rejection but ended with the perfect proposal? Sophia asked the crowd during her own brief speech, her legal training making public speaking natural. Vincent and I are proof that sometimes the best things come to those who fight for them, who refuse to accept other people's limitations, who believe in second chances. 1 year later, Sophia stood in the bridal suite of Chicago's most exclusive hotel, adjusting her wedding dress with hands that trembled slightly with excitement rather than nerves. The gown was a masterpiece of ivory silk and delicate beading, custom designed to celebrate her curves while projecting elegance and sophistication. Her hair was swept into an elaborate updo adorned with vintage pins that had belonged to Vincent's grandmother, a gesture of acceptance from his family that meant everything to her. Vincent's mother knocked softly on the door, entering with a jewelry box that contained the Torino family pearls. For the women who marry for love rather than obligation, she said warmly, fastening the necklace around Sophia's throat. Vincent's father chose well when he gave these to me, and Vincent has chosen even better with you. The ceremony was held in the hotel's rooftop garden, with 300 guests witnessing their vows against the backdrop of Chicago's skyline. Sophia's legal colleagues sat alongside Vincent's business associates, and both their families, professional success and personal happiness finally integrated completely. Vincent's vows brought tears to half the assembled guests, his voice breaking with emotion as he promised to cherish Sophia's mind, body, and spirit for the rest of their lives. Sophia's response was equally moving. Her legal eloquence transformed into poetry as she described how he had helped her become the woman she was always meant to be. Their first dance was to the same song that had been playing when they met 3 years earlier. But this time Vincent held her like she was precious beyond measure, his attention focused entirely on her face rather than seeking approval from anyone else. 6 months after their wedding, Sophia stood in their shared office, reviewing contracts for Vincent's latest construction project while unconsciously resting one hand on her still flat stomach. The pregnancy was early enough that they were keeping the news private for a few more weeks, but the knowledge filled her with joy and anticipation. Vincent entered with lunch from her favorite restaurant, setting the containers on her desk before pressing a kiss to the top of her head. The Morrison Industries expansion is officially approved, he announced. Your legal work cleared every regulatory hurdle perfectly. Sophia smiled up at him, marveling at how completely their lives had intertwined. Professional partners, romantic partners, soon to be parents together. Everything she had once thought impossible had become not just possible, but inevitable. "I have some news too," she said, pulling him down for a proper kiss. "The federal appeals court accepted our brief in the Patterson case. We're going to Washington next month to argue before the Supreme Court." Vincent's pride in her accomplishments never failed to move her. His support had been unwavering through every career milestone, every professional challenge, every moment when she needed someone to believe in her capabilities completely. The afternoon Chicago Tribune lay open on Sophia's desk, featuring a front-page article about their legal partnership and its impact on federal criminal defense. The headline read, "Power Couple Reshapes Chicago Legal Landscape," with photos of them leaving the courthouse after another major victory. 3 years ago, Sophia had been a junior associate struggling for recognition and respect. Today, she was a partner in one of Chicago's most successful law firms, married to the man who had once broken her heart, carrying his child, and building a future that exceeded her most ambitious dreams. Vincent's hand covered hers on her stomach, their shared secret creating intimacy even in the professional setting of their office. "I love you, Mrs. Torino," he whispered against her ear. "Thank you for seeing past my mistakes and giving us this incredible life together." Sophia leaned back against his chest, surrounded by evidence of their professional success and personal happiness. "Thank you for becoming the man I always knew you could be," she replied. "Thank you for loving all of me, exactly as I am." Their transformation was complete. The woman who had been rejected for not meeting someone else's standards had created her own standards and exceeded them magnificently. The man who had been blind to true beauty had learned to see clearly and love completely. Together, they had built something neither could have achieved alone. A partnership based on respect, admiration, and the kind of deep love that transforms everything it touches.